è brutto perdere due finali nel giro di 3 anni.
Alla fine di eterno non.
In the early 1980s, European football was dominated by giants. Yet among all the clubs that rose and fell during that golden era, one stood apart. Juventus, La Vecchia Signora, the old lady of Turin. A team that carried the weight of history, the pride of a city, and the hopes of an entire nation. This was not just a football club, it was an empire. Backed by the Agnelli family, owners of Fiat, and symbols of Italian industrial power, Juventus became the reflection of Italy's strength and ambition. When you saw the black and white stripes on the pitch, you weren't just watching a team, you were witnessing a machine built to win, a dynasty forged with ruthless precision. Their rise was meteoric. Under Giovanni Trapattoni, Juventus conquered Serie A with relentless efficiency. They were not flamboyant, not careless, they were clinical. They were disciplined. And yet, in moments of brilliance, they displayed artistry that left crowds in awe. The icons of this era were legends in their own right. Michel Platini, the French maestro, whose vision and elegance redefined the role of a playmaker. Boniek, the Polish warrior, who combined flair with an unstoppable engine. And Gaetano Scirea, the gentleman defender, calm under pressure, graceful in movement. A leader who embodied class both on and off the pitch. Together, they became unstoppable. Juventus dominated Italy, winning league titles as if they were collecting souvenirs. But Serie A was not enough. Their ambitions stretched beyond national borders. They wanted Europe. They wanted immortality. As the 1980s unfolded, Juventus marched through European competitions with an aura of inevitability. Their football was not the reckless chaos of some rivals. It was precise, surgical, calculated. Opponents often spoke of the suffocating grip Juventus imposed on the game. They could strangle hope from a match, and then, with a single Platini free kick or a Boniek sprint, they would kill it off completely. The fans knew they were living through history. Week after week, the Stadio Comunale echoed with chants, banners, and a pride that spilled across Italy. Juventus were not just champions, they were symbols of Italian modernity, a country that had rebuilt itself from post-war ruins into an economic powerhouse. On the football pitch, Juventus carried that same narrative: discipline, resilience, progress, triumph. And by 1985, Juventus stood at the peak of their power. They had conquered everything at home. Their name was feared across Europe. The European Cup, the most prestigious prize in club football, seemed destined to be theirs. The stage was set. This was supposed to be their coronation, their ultimate triumph. And yet, destiny is cruel. For in that pursuit of immortality, Juventus would pay a price no trophy could ever justify. At that moment in history, few could see it coming. The banners waved, the songs echoed, the black and white stripes stood tall. But beneath the glory, beneath the triumph, shadows were forming. The beautiful game was about to reveal its darkest night, because sometimes greatness carries a curse. May 29th, 1985, Brussels, Belgium. It should have been the crowning moment. Juventus versus Liverpool, two giants of European football, facing each other in the European Cup final. The world was watching. For Juventus, this was destiny. For their fans, it was a pilgrimage. But the stage they were given was not worthy of the occasion. The Heysel Stadium was a relic. Old, decaying, and crumbling. Built in the 1920s, it was falling apart by the mid-1980s. Cracked walls, rusted fences, concrete eroding with time. A temple unfit for gods. Yet here, UEFA had decided the greatest final of the decade would be played. From the very beginning, tension was in the air. The city of Brussels was uneasy. Thousands of fans poured in, many without proper tickets, many already intoxicated, many carrying old rivalries that ran deeper than the game itself. Liverpool and Juventus supporters were placed dangerously close to each other, separated only by a thin wire fence and a fragile wall. It was a recipe for disaster. As kickoff approached, chants turned to taunts, taunts to shoves, and shoves into chaos. Bottles flew, stones were thrown. The thin barriers that UEFA had trusted to hold back the tide gave way almost instantly. In one terrible moment, the fragile wall crumbled. Concrete shattered. Human lives were crushed beneath the weight of panic. What was supposed to be a festival of football turned into a nightmare. Fans ran in every direction. Some tried to climb over fences. Platini's penalty gave Juventus the lead, but there was no joy in his celebration, no triumph in that moment. The crowd's noise was not the sound of victory, it was the sound of mourning. Juventus lifted the European Cup, but in their hands it was not a trophy, it was a burden, a cursed prize, dripping not with champagne, but with sorrow. In the days that followed, the world searched for answers. The English clubs were banned from European competitions for years. Liverpool bore the shame of that night, a wound that scarred the club for generations. UEFA faced global outrage for its negligence, and Juventus carried a pain that words could barely describe. For the players, the images never left them. The sight of collapsed walls, the sound of desperate screams, the knowledge that their greatest triumph was stained forever. For the fans, Heysel became a word whispered with grief, a shadow that followed the club wherever it went. The night of Heysel was more than a tragedy. It was the death of innocence in European football. It exposed the greed of institutions, the failure of safety, the recklessness of authorities who valued spectacle over human life. It was proof that football, the world's most beautiful game, could turn into its ugliest nightmare. And for Juventus, the victory that should have crowned them as eternal kings of Europe instead chained them to eternal sorrow. Because in Heysel, football did not win, humanity lost. When the final whistle blew at Heysel, Juventus were crowned champions of Europe. On paper, history recorded them as winners. But every photograph from that night tells another story. Gaetano Scirea, the captain, lifted the European Cup high into the air. Yet his face revealed no joy. His eyes were not the eyes of a victor. They were heavy, haunted. Behind the glimmer of silver, you could almost see the weight of 39 souls pressing down on his shoulders. Michel Platini, the genius playmaker who had delivered the winning goal, would later speak of that night with regret. He celebrated at the time because that's what footballers do when they score. But in the years that followed, the images of his raised arms and smiling face became unbearable. He knew, everyone knew, that celebration was a hollow gesture in a stadium of mourning. The years after Heysel were marked by silence. In Turin, the subject became almost taboo. Juventus players aged quickly, burdened by the invisible weight they carried. Fans struggled with the duality of emotions, pride for the win, sorrow for the loss. Newspapers stopped printing pictures of the final. Museums hid the story in dusty corners. It was as if the club itself tried to bury the memory. But history does not forget, and shadows never truly disappear. Scirea himself would die tragically only 4 years later in a car accident, deepening the sense that this Juventus era was cursed. Other players spoke less and less about 1985, as if the pain was too much to carry into words. The European Cup, once the most coveted prize, sat in silence, a trophy that cost them their soul. For football as a whole, Heysel was a turning point. It forced reforms, it forced change, it forced Europe to look into the mirror and confront its negligence. Stadiums would never again be chosen so carelessly. Security would never again be treated as an afterthought. But these changes came at a price, paid by those who never returned home from Brussels. Juventus eventually won other trophies, other finals, other moments of triumph, but none could erase Heysel. It remained a scar on the club's history, a silent reminder that glory can come at a price too high to pay. The story of Juventus in the 1980s is not just about dominance, trophies, or legends like Platini and Scirea. It is about the fragility of football, the cost of negligence, and the truth that sometimes victory is indistinguishable from loss. When fans today look back, they don't just see a team that conquered Europe. They see the night football broke, the night 39 voices were silenced, the night Juventus won a trophy. and lost their soul. And now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe Juventus ever truly recovered from the tragedy of Heysel? Was this victory worth the pain that came with it? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, if you believe football's past must never be forgotten, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more hidden, haunting, and powerful stories from the game we love. Because football is not only about the goals we celebrate, it's about the shadows we must never forget.